Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to a new week of study, and we're going to continue studying Daniel chapter 11 in connection. Well, we're going to study Revelation 17. We're going to go over some things, but we're looking at Daniel chapter 11, actually 10, 11, and 12, Daniel's last vision. But before we begin, can you join me in a word of prayer? Dear Father in heaven, we are grateful once again to come together, to open your word, and to invite your Holy Spirit into our hearts and into this study. We know, Lord, that as we have continued to follow line upon line, that we have seen things that we did not expect, that we've been corrected in many of our misconceptions regarding these prophecies. And we just ask that you can continue to lead and guide, help us to follow where you lead, and to understand these truths for our time. Be with each person who is studying these things on the internet, and may you bless your word, and may it not return to you void. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. So we've spent a lot of time going through Revelation 12, 13, and 17. We'll look at Revelation 17 again, just kind of review what we had done last week or the last 2 weeks in connection with those visions of John's. But we know that what we have been studying has been Daniel chapter 11, verse 2. And that has been the main point of this study, is that we were directed to do this by Colin. He wanted us to look at Daniel chapter 11 at his study, which was presented on December 25th, 2021. And in addressing Colin's study, there was this connection between Daniel 11, the first few verses, and Daniel chapter 3, that is the golden image, and also with the riddle of Revelation 17. And the idea that he had there is that he's going to take these kings of Persia and he's going to line them up with the presidents of the United States. Now, if we look at these two verses, also in the first year of Darius the Mede, I even stood to confirm and strengthen him. This is not when the vision occurs. The vision is going to occur, as we see in chapter 10, in what is called the third year of Cyrus. Now, we know that that's the first year of Cyrus after Darius the Mede has died. It's the third year from the fall of Babylon. And we know that from a number of different things, but one is in Daniel chapter 1, verse 21. It says, "And Daniel continued even unto the first year of the king of Cyrus." So obviously in chapter 10, this year that is called the third year would be what is called the first year in chapter 2. And that is Cyrus is he's the king of Persia long before Babylon falls. He's the general in the year that Darius is mentioned for the fall of Babylon, Darius the Mede. And then within about 2 years from the fall of Babylon, Cyrus comes to the throne. And so here, Daniel's simply calling this the third year since the fall of Babylon, because Cyrus does become the king of lands when Babylon falls. So he has a new title. So Cyrus has different counts. You can talk about the third year of Cyrus, which is going to be like, whatever it is. I can't remember how long he had reigned before Babylon fell, but it's going to be some 10 years or so before Babylon falls. So Cyrus is already the king of Persia, already a king. He's going to become the king of lands when Babylon falls. And so that would be the third year of him being the king of lands. He's also going to become the king of all of Persia, which is what is being referred to in Daniel 1, verse 21. So the first year of Cyrus. So the point is, when we look at this vision, it's starting at a period of time that we would mark as the time of the end. That is, it has two different kings, Darius the Mede and Cyrus the Persian. Babylon's going to fall, and then within about 2 years, Darius dies, and Cyrus becomes the king of all of Persia. So it now becomes the Persian Empire rather than the Medo-Persian Empire. Now, still, the Medes are part of it, but they only have one king now instead of two. Then from then it says, now I will show thee the truth. There shall stand up yet 3 kings in Persia. So we know that we're going to have Cambyses, false Smyrtus, and then Darius the Persian, or Darius the Great, Darius Hystaspes, right? And then a 4th shall be far richer than they all, and that's going to be Xerxes. And by his strength, through his riches, he shall stir up all against the realm of Grecia, which is what Xerxes does in Ezra chapter 1. It's discussing his plans to go against Greece. And then it's going to move to Alexander the Great, because Grecia is mentioned next, and then it says a mighty king shall stand up. That's the king of Grecia. That's Alexander. And then he's going to be broken in verse 4, and his kingdom's going to be divided towards the 4 winds of heaven, not to his posterity, nor according to the dominion which he ruled, for his kingdom shall be plucked up, even for others besides those. So we're going to see that his generals are going to divide Greece in various ways at first. It ends up being basically 4, and then 2, and then finally eventually 1 when it's conquered by Rome. So that kingdom becomes absorbed by Rome. But the king of the north is ultimately going to destroy the king of the south, and that's going to be Paneum, right? So, and then connected with that is going to be this whole history of Rome coming in and taking over. So the point is, it's divided towards the 4 winds of heaven, right? It's not divided towards 4 generals. It's just divided completely, but they do basically break into 4 parts: north, south, east, and west. And the north is going to be the Seleucid Empire, and the south is going to be the Ptolemaic Empire. And then it's going to show in Daniel chapter 11 these various battles, what's going to happen in the future from Daniel's perspective. Now, our focus so far has been upon these kings. So prior to us understanding any of this, we had studied the kings of Persia. And the kings of Persia were studied, the first 7 kings of Persia, because we had the last 7 kings of Judah. That is, in 2013, Jeff is going to go through a study dealing with the kings of Judah, beginning with Manasseh all the way up to Zedekiah. And there's going to be 4 events, the 4 7 times are going to be fulfilled in that history. And so those 7 kings from Manasseh to Zedekiah become this model. He connects it to the 7 thunders. And so he begins comparing these 7 kings with the 7 kings of Persia. And as time goes on, we then come to understand the kings of Persia. And in Daniel chapter 11, we start to make this prediction regarding Trump as far as Xerxes. Now, we have sort of mixed these together. That is, we have these 7 kings of Persia, we have the 7 kings of Judah, and we also have the 7 presidents of the United States. But initially, Jeff never counted up to 7, right? He would stop with, because he's using Daniel chapter 11, he would just stop with Xerxes. Now we know following Xerxes is going to be Greece. That is going to be the globalists. Now Colin has tried to say, no, what's mentioned there as Alexander is actually Trump again, right? Now I knew that was wrong. How to explain that was wrong back on December 25th, 2021, because I'd never seen that before. I just knew it was wrong. And I had some reasons why I thought it might be wrong. But part of those reasons had to do with these seven kings of Persia, going back to the original study of how we had done this. And so we've taken the time to go through all of that history, everything that we could possibly look at that relates to these things. Now, the big thing that Colin was doing was applying this riddle to the presidents of the United States. But in doing so, he was making a common assumption that we have all made, is that the seven kings are the same as the seven heads, which are the seven mountains. And so only recently have we even considered that when it says, and there are seven kings, five are fallen and one is, and the other is not yet come, that this is not referencing the heads at all, that this is referencing the kings who exist at the end of the world, in which this beast is representing. So it's representing modern Rome, what's happening at the end of the world. Now, the woman rides this beast, this scarlet colored beast, and she sits upon seven hills. And that would be a reference to Rome itself, because that's the seat of Rome in which she controls the world. And it's true that she controls the world from Rome all through that history of the papacy. But this is talking about, it's referencing us back to the end. Now, we know that it's going to bring us to, in verse 8, the beast that thou sawest was and is not. And we just assume that that's the scarlet colored beast. But if we think about it, and in the study that we've shown, that this is actually the beast of Revelation 13 that's being referenced. So once we see that, we can see that this is the explanation of this woman who is the papacy riding this scarlet colored beast. In order to understand that, he refers us back to the papal beast, the leopard-like beast of Revelation 13, because it's the only beast which could have been, is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit. That can't be said of the scarlet colored beast. And we looked at the pioneers' understanding that this is a form of Roman government and that this is the Republican form, and that the period that it is not is the papal period. But none of this really made any sense, right? So, or pardon me, the is not is the empirical period. And then it comes back, there's the seventh head, and then the eighth. None of this made any sense. It created all kinds of contradictions. So we came to the conclusion that the heads are not the same in each of the beasts, and the horns, even though they have some similarities, are not the same things. Now, the horns of Revelation 12, we take to be the 10 emperors, not the 10 kingdoms that come in and cause the fall of Rome, because they're part of pagan Rome. Now, we could be wrong about that. Maybe there's some way in which we could address those as being the 10 pagan kingdoms. But definitely in Revelation 13, they are the kingdoms of Europe as they come out of those nations that conquer Rome. Now, we know there isn't 10 tribes that conquer Rome, but there is 10 kingdoms that result, according to A.T. Jones. And that's going to be in 476, that you're going to have these 10 nations. And these are going to lead to, ultimately, Rome is going to pluck up 3 of those. But still, 10 becomes that symbol during that period of time. And we're saying the 10 horns in our time represent the whole world as represented by the United Nations. So we have the heads and the horns. So the heads are different things in different beasts, and the horns are different things in different beasts. But if we recognize that, then when it says there are 7 kings, this would have been in that the other beasts. So we have the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet. So the dragon power is going to be represented by these 10 horns. But the 7 kings are part of apostate Protestantism. They're the false prophet. That's where the seven kings are. And so we still have to prove some of these things. That is, we still have to discuss them and look at them. But what we would say is that we have had these seven Persian kings, and we have had the last seven kings of Judah. So the first seven kings of Persia, last seven kings of Judah. And we've looked at other ones. But the question is, if there are seven kings, that this is not related to, if it's not related to the heads, we can see it is modeled after first the last seven kings of Judah. It also would be modeled after the seven kings of Rome, and also the first seven kings of Persia. And that these seven kings, then, how we got that is in God's providence. So now we're going to agree with Colin that these seven kings represent the presidents of the United States. But we're not going to necessarily, we have to examine how we are going to number these seven kings. Are we going to start, as Colin does, with Reagan as the first? Or are we going to line them up the way that we had when we looked at the seven kings of Persia, with which would mean we would have to put George Bush as the first? Or is there other ways in which we could understand these seven kings? And then we have to understand, if five are fallen and one is, when is, right? And the other is not yet come, and when he cometh, he must continue a short space. Now we can see that the beast that was and is not, even he is the eighth. That's pretty clear. The beast that was and is not is the papal beast of Revelation 13. He was in 1798. He is not, but he is the eighth, and he will, and it says he is of the seven. Now, when we look at the Greek, that is not, it doesn't say that he is one of the seven, but that he comes from the seven. Now, if we can see that there was a league made with the papacy by the United States, by Reagan, we can see that, and we know that these kings, these last seven kings, are connected to this league, that in some way we can say that whatever happens, because we know it's going to be this two-horned beast of Revelation 13 that's going to create an image to the beast and cause all the world to worship the beast and his image, then we can see how the eighth is going to be the result of, that is, it's going to be of the seven, of these kings at the end of the world, that we call the presidents of the United States. Now, that's a long explanation. Any thoughts on any of that?
Yeah, what comes to me is where it says in the spirit of prophecy, this child of the papacy, referring to Sunday. Mm-hmm. So the law regarding Sunday, and I'm thinking, okay, you have the U.S. marrying the papacy, and they produce the Sunday law, the child of the papacy.
Yes. So we can see how it says the eighth is of the seven. That is, it's of these seven. So if we look at it this way, we have the beast, that's the papacy, that's the beast of Revelation 13, the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet, right? So the beast is the beast of Revelation 13, the beast that was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit. That's the papacy. And it's also the eighth. Okay? So it's, now we have the 10 horns. The 10 horns is the UN. That's the world, right? The papacy has controlled the world through its civil power in Rome, right? But it is a religious power. It's a woman, but it's acting as a civil power in order to exercise its power. But it doesn't have power until the UN gives its power. Now the 10 horns are going to receive power 1 hour with the beast, with this woman, with the papacy. But in this, we have to say, well, where is the United States? If the 7 heads are these 7 kingdoms, that doesn't really fit. It just makes the United States one of those heads. But if the 7 kings are representing one of those heads of the beast of Revelation 13, right? The one when the beast is not, we can see how Revelation 13, the second part, dealing with the 2-horned beast that rises in 1798, must be the power that has the 7 kings. That is, the 7 kings would not be popes. They can't be the progressive kingdoms, right? They can't be Babylon, right? So the 7 kings must be the presidents of the United States at the end of the world, at the time of the end. And so we have to figure out how to count those out. Now, so I'm going to do it, I guess, this way. I'm going to just draw a diagram like this. Like that. Okay, so I'm just gonna expand this period of the 7 kings, just so we have this as a drawing. Okay, so we're going to take this, we're going to expand this out like that. And so we have this other line that we're going to draw. So we're going to have these 7 presidents. I'll do it this way. Okay, so we're going to have a new line here of these 7 kings. So we're just going to place them in here. Now, how we number these kings is part of the difficulty, right? So we're not really sure how to number these kings at this point. And so we know we're going to have, oops. Now, we have talked about numbering the first king as Reagan. Now, why would we number the first king as Reagan?
He brought down the USSR with the help of Pope John Paul II.
Okay, and he's going to make a league, right? So that would be the main reason, is this league that he makes. Okay. And now, why is that important as far as numbering him? So we're gonna.
Well, I'm thinking that all the so-called U.S. kings since then have made leagues with the papacy. But I did see when Trump went to visit the Pope, it was a few years ago, and that Pope was furious at the end of that meeting, and there was no buddy handshaking and hugs and all that stuff. So I think my theory is that at that time, Francis wanted to impose, like, let's do a Sunday law, for the US, and Trump declined. That's my theory. Can't be
Yeah,
proven
it
yet.
definitely is possible, right? So we don't know the whole story of what's happening always behind the scenes. But one thing was, we know that Xerxes typifies Trump, and Xerxes does not support a Sunday law, right? So that's one of the things we learned studying Esther. Now, so we're going to have, of course, here we're going to have 8 waymarks. Oops, I don't know why I typed in 8 there. I guess because I was saying 8. Okay, so we have these. And so we have all these different waymarks, and we have to decide how we're going to number them. Like how we're going to name them or label them. So we got so if Reagan was the first one, this would be Reagan, Bush the first, Clinton, Bush the second, Obama, Trump, Biden, right? If we're just going to do sort of how Colin was doing it. And then he was going to have the 8th to be Trump again. But we know that the 8th is not one of the 7, but he comes from the 7. That is, the United States, this 2-horned beast, is going to speak as a dragon, and that it's going to create an image to the beast. And so the 8th, it tells us plainly, is the beast that was and is not, right? So that means these 7 kings are 7 presidents of the United States, but there's going to be an 8th. But that 8th is not a president of the United States, right? He's just going to follow after the 7th president. Now, one of the problems we would have if we say that these are actual presidents, and then we just say, well, Biden is the 7th. We have to say that Biden represents something more than just, or the 7th here represents something more than just Biden. That it represents the globalists, right? That the globalists have taken over the United States. Now, when the globalists are conquered, then the papacy will come in. So that's one way of looking at it. Now, we could say, well, the 8th has to be one of the presidents of the United States. But if the 8th is the beast that was and is not, I don't see how the 8th can be Trump, right? Because it tells us what the 8th is. It uses the symbol of the papacy. Now, we know that Colin is doing something different. That is, he's taking the traditional interpretation that we have, and he's simply making an application of the riddle to the presidents of the United States. He's not interpreting the 7 kings in its direct form as the 7 presidents. He's only doing it in a secondary form as a parallel, right? So he's going to have the 5th that falls in this riddle in these kings initially to be Papal Rome, the 6th to be the United States, the 7th to be the UN, and then the 8th to be the papacy again. And so he just simply applies this to the presidents of the United States. We are saying that based upon how we read this and how we discern the interpretation of the angel to this vision in Revelation 17, how he explains the woman and the scarlet-colored beast that she's riding upon, that these 7 kings cannot be the 7 heads upon which the woman sitteth. Right? And that seems to be the most consistent. It gets rid of all kinds of different contradictions. But it means that if we're applying them directly to the presidents of the United States at the end of the world, that seventh one must be different, right? It can't be just a president. It has to be Biden, but beyond Biden. And whether that's reasonable or not, that's what we have to decide. Now, that's if we start with Reagan as number one. Now, if we start with Bush the first as the first, and we parallel him with Cyrus and how we count the 7 kings of Persia, well, then we have the 5 are fallen. Trump is going to be the 5th one, not the 6th. Biden would be the 6th, aligning with Artabanus. And then we would have a 7th, which would be what? Some other president? Right? Who would line up with Artaxerxes. And then we would have an 8th. Now, one of the things that we talked about before was that when we looked at the 7 kings of Judah, the last 7 kings of Judah, and we get to Zedekiah as the 7th king, Babylon is going to conquer Jerusalem and remove Zedekiah, kill him. And it then says, I will overturn it until he come whose right it is. Now, since Babylon is the power there, it's going to be overturned to Medo-Persia, overturned to Greece, and overturned to Rome. And then Christ is going to come, and he is the true king. He is the 8th king of Judah in that context. So we can see that however we're going to understand these 7 kings and the 8th, it is a counterfeit of Christ. Right? Does that make sense to people? So that is, the papacy is counterfeiting Christ. Is that consistent with what we understand?
Sure is.
Okay.
Yes.
It's made a logical point.
Okay. So what we still have to determine is where we start. Now, there are reasons to start with Reagan, but if we go back to the model is going to start with the first 7 kings of Persia and the last 7 kings of Judah. And if we're going to line up the first 7 kings of Persia, we have to start with Cyrus, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So is there any other way that we can look at this? Now, I guess just to throw a Spaniard in the works, or a spanner in the works, is to suggest one of the problems that we have always had is Artabanus. Now, I still like Artabanus there. I think it lines up best when we put him as parallel to Biden, right? So I like this view better. I don't like to start with Reagan, but if we have Artabanus in there, I like it. Now, some people suggest that Artabanus is not a king of Persia, that he's just a placeholder there temporarily, which is why I like him for Biden. Biden becomes a placeholder, but he still is marked as the 6th. Now, maybe there's some other way that we haven't thought about yet. But what if Artabanus isn't there, right? What if we start, instead, we count the 7 kings of Persia. We're not really dealing with the kings of Persia per se, but just the 7 kings from the fall of Babylon. Well, then you could say, okay, Darius the Mede is the first one, and that would parallel Reagan. And Cyrus is the second one, right? And you just don't have Artabanus in there at all, right? You would then have Darius the Mede, number 1, Cyrus, Cambyses, number 3, False Smyrtus, number 4, Darius, number 5th, and then you would have, did I do this right? I don't think so. Yeah, then Xerxes, number 6th, and then you would have Artaxerxes, number 7. So it's just kind of weird getting rid of Artabanus. But we don't have an 8th here per se, right? So, you know, we're not going to have the 8th king of Persia that somehow fulfills that role. And so I don't really know how we would deal with these 8 symbols if we're going to apply it to the kings of Persia. We could, of course, just count all of them, right? So that the first one is Darius the Mede, and then you have the 8th one, you put Artabanus in there, and the 8th one. But then that's 8 kings of Persia, right? So each time we look at it to try to make this parallel, we know that the model or the template for the 7 kings is going to be the last 7 kings of Judah. So I mean, I like Artabanus being number 6. I like Artaxerxes number 7. So these are the kings of Persia. Who's number 8 though? Like if we're gonna use that model from the kings of Judah, how would we address this? We just don't address the 8th when it comes to the king of Persia. I'm going to get these guys' names lined up here too. I'll just use abbreviations. Darius the Mede, Cyrus, Cambyses. Oops. Any thoughts on this as I'm drawing this out? False Smyrtus. Darius the first. Now here we're just putting all these 8 in here. So nobody has any comments on this? Any thoughts? Any questions?
Still thinking about it, Colin, Theodore.
Yeah, well, can you think out loud? Anybody? Any ideas? So obviously we got these possibilities. Now, if we did it this way, I mean, the numbers aren't matching the first 7 kings of Persia.
Right.
In this one, it's just, yeah. So any thoughts on this, Dwight?
I'd had to step away for a second, but I've also been going over other points of history in
Okay.
all of this.
Okay.
One of the things that I have been considering since something I looked at yesterday had a lot to do with how the different kings, whether we're talking Persian, Greek, or Roman,
Mhm.
come down to conquer Egypt. Now, I recognize that Egypt has been considered as the king of the South, right?
Well, dealing with when you're dealing with Greece, yeah. I mean, it's also referred to the south from Israel because they come up from the south, just as Babylon is said to be the king of the north
Right,
in other sort of illustrations. But in Greece, it is the king of the south, the Ptolemaic Empire.
right. But there was a point in history where Cambyses went to conquer Egypt.
Yeah.
So we can point to kings of Persia, kings of Greece, and kings of Rome that
Okay.
that had conquered Egypt.
Okay.
Now, did we ever have a situation of Babylon going down into Egypt as well?
Going into Egypt?
Yeah, conquering them.
Well, I don't know about completely conquering them.
Yes, he did, didn't it? You have in Isaiah, it talks about them, don't it?
Well, they're going to have wars with Babylon and Egypt have wars. I
Right.
mean, but as far as Babylon conquering Egypt so that it becomes part of the Babylonian Empire, I don't think that occurred.
Right. Now, we're looking at these situations where we have these, as you're pointing out, we're looking at the time period from 1989 to the Sunday Law being a period of about 7 kings.
Yes.
And as you're lining this out, Cyrus, Cambyses, False Smyrtus, Darius, Xerxes, and then Artabanus, but then also going after that to Artaxerxes as the 8th.
Because here I could just simply do this. I mean, yeah, because that doesn't make sense to me, to be honest. I mean, I would say this makes more sense.
I would agree.
Yeah. Yeah, to put Darius the Mede as one of them, well, just
it doesn't fit.
right, because he's not a king of Persia. Now, it doesn't mean that Darius the Mede doesn't have any part to play, right? Because he does. He's going to be there at the time of the end, right? So when we deal with paralleling these to the presidents of the United States, and we say, well, there was this league made with Rome by Reagan, well, that still would line him up with Darius the Mede.
Right.
He's just not going to come a part of that count of the 7. Right? Now, I've considered it because, because we would say, well, the 5 are fallen, Xerxes is the one, or Trump is the one, that is, 5 are fallen, 1 is, and 1's still yet to come. But here in this, we're going to have these first 5 kings. And if we want to have some kind of parallel, even though we're not saying that the 7 kings are the 7 heads, but there still is some kind of parallel to those heads, right?
Well, this is
we know
also,
because the beast that was and is not, it's going to be is not in 1798, right? And then the United States is going to be there. And then, so that's going to be the 6th, and then the UN is going to be the 7th. So if we have it this way, then the one that is not Trump, as we would have in Collins' list, but Biden.
Correct.
Right. And so Artabanus would line up with Biden, and that would be the time in which we are directed. We're directed to the end of the United States. So there's 7 kings. Now, those kings are presidents of the United States, but still at that time, they aren't in control of the globalists until Artabanus. Now we know Xerxes loses to the globalists. That parallels that history. Obviously, Artabanus is going to come later, but still it parallels the idea that he loses to the globalists. And Artabanus, in this case, in the presidents of the United States, is going to be Biden, who aligns with the globalists. And that means that the 7th king could be a president of the United States in this symbol, right? It's not just, some abstract thing. It would be the next president is going to be the 7th.
Well, the way that
Yeah. Okay. Go on.
the way that you have this presented right now
Mhm.
is better in line with Daniel 10, segueing to Daniel 11:2, because as 11:2 has read, and as I think you've been pointing out, the situation that we've got right now is we have this taking place during the rule of Cyrus.
Mhm.
Daniel is then shown that 3 kings are going to come up after Cyrus,
Mhm.
and then the 4th will be richer than they all.
Yeah.
Now,
And then the next thing is going to be Greece, which Artabanus or Biden would represent.
we know that Greece has been increasing in power at that time. I'm speaking the historical Greece. Just like we're understanding that Greece is, or the globalists are increasing in power right now.
Mhm.
So the lineup, as you're pointing out here, taking Darius the Mede as the equivalent of Reagan,
Yeah.
Cyrus then
Bush the first.
Bush the first, and then Clinton as Cambyses.
Yeah.
Bush the second as false Smyrtus. Obama as Darius, and then Trump here as Xerxes.
Yeah. And then this would be Biden, a placeholder.
Right.
But then the next president would be the 7th. Now,
Correct.
one of the things to know about this is that these kings of Persia are paralleling the kings of Judah, right? So we have that idea. Now, in the kings of Judah, you're going to have the 8th being Christ. You're going to have this overturning, leading to Christ. So he is the 8th. So in these 7 kings, Bush the first, Clinton, Bush the second, Obama, Trump, Biden, Artaxerxes. Then the eighth is going to be the papacy, right? So the eighth is the papal power. Now, when we line them up this way, though, we don't end up with an eighth for the kings of Persia that I know of. We've never tried to say, well, who is the eighth in the kings of Persia? Right. I mean, there are other kings of Persia, but we don't have that parallel in the kings of Persia. And of course, we have the other illustration, which is, three shall stand up, there shall be a fourth. But then the next is Greece, right? Not Artabanus. But we would have to say whoever the next president is, this president would be the one that would initiate this Sunday law. If this model is correct. But then the eighth would have to be the papacy. Right. So if we're going to have an eighth here, taking these seven kings, well, the eighth, he's the beast. So we could just here put simply the beast. That's going to be the eighth. Right. Because if we're applying the riddle of the seven kings, that has to be the seven kings. Whoever this is, this would just be a question mark. We don't know who that is. But the eighth is the beast. But it's because this is the image to the beast that is being represented by these seven kings. Because we can see that the image to the beast is formed in our history. Now, Reagan parallels Darius the Mede. They're not numbered as one of the seven, but there's still, Reagan is there in making that league with Rome. So what follows are the seven. And so it's a little bit different, of course, than what Colin's doing, because he wants Trump to come back into power and be the seventh. Or in this case, I guess he would have Trump be the eighth, right? Which wouldn't make sense. Now, the question is, how do we understand this seventh? Do we just understand it? Because we can see that Biden represents the globalists, but he is a placeholder. So is this going to be the conservative response to wokeism? Or is this going to be just more of the globalists again? We don't know who the next president is going to be at this point. The main thing that we're trying to point out here is that this is based upon a model of the seven kings. Now, we did look at the seven kings as the seven heads. So we have the seven heads over there. And the reason why I have the seven heads, which aren't in this Revelation 17, those are not what we were saying the seven heads are. So these are the seven kings. Revelation 12, right? Now,
Right.
They are related to the seven hills. That is, these seven kings establish these various hills. It's not just as direct as that, but they do developments on these different hills. So the seven kings are connected to these seven hills. That's part of what the seven kings, and it could be why in legend they have seven kings, because they have seven hills. I don't know. But the point is that's the model here I think, for the kings in Revelation chapter 17 is it's referring back to these first original 7 kings of Rome. So just the end is declared from the beginning. So you have 7 kings at the end of, pagan Rome, or at the beginning of pagan Rome, and you have 7 kings at the end of modern Rome. And they're going to be these presidents of the United States in this context. So it ties lots of different things together. But the 7 hills of Rome are the 7 heads in Revelation 17. Okay. Any other thoughts on this? So I know you had more to say, Dwight, and I kind of cut you off there.
No, you're fine. I mean, there's a lot really to be looked at here, because some of what we have all been paying attention with, and we've all been looking at, is we need to have a better understanding of our history in line with what Daniel 11:2 is saying. This fits better than the idea of placing Darius the Mede in the number 1 position.
Yeah, or placing Reagan in the number 1 position.
Well, I'm speaking in the lineup that's before us right now.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, definitely works better. Yeah.
So the direction that we take, especially in what we're trying to work through here with Revelation 17 and comparing this with Daniel 11, is that Revelation as being the open book and Daniel 11 being its companion, they need to be able to agree with each other. And this is definitely more in agreement than what we've seen before.
Yeah. Yes. And then, we have Xerxes stirring up all against the realm of Grecia. And the next thing is going to be Alexander the Great, Greece, right? And we would say, well, Trump stirred up all against the realm of Grecia, the globalists. And with the fall of the United States on January 6, 2021, with Biden, which is where Trump is defeated and Biden then wins, the globalists win, Biden just becomes a placeholder. So he's not Alexander the Great as a king or anything like that. But it does represent the globalists conquering them. Now we know Xerxes loses not to Alexander the Great, right? He loses to just to Greece. Alexander is going to be later. So in this context, if we're going to talk about Alexander, we definitely aren't placing him at Biden, right? We're just saying that's the next kingdom that comes, is going to be Greece. The 3 shall stand up, the 4th, and then it doesn't say, they're going to have another king of Persia. They just go directly to Alexander. So Biden becomes a placeholder as a president.
Right.
So the question is, do we have another president who then, because remember, this is the undoing of the captivity, the top line here, Cyrus. This is the 3 decrees that is ending the captivity, reestablishing God's people. In this one, this is a dissolution of the United States, right?
Correct.
If anything's being set up, any kingdom, it's the kingdom for the beast to rule over, right?
Well, we're also in a situation, because what Sister White has pointed out several times in what she has presented, that there would be what would seem to be another civil war, right?
Yeah.
Now, Biden as a placeholder is not any different than the president that preceded Lincoln.
Okay.
He was definitely a placeholder, but he was someone that was ambivalent about the struggle that was going on from 1856 to 1860 in the free and the slave states.
Okay. Now, so when we're dealing with Lincoln, I mean, we're going to have lots of presidents of the United States. I mean, the first is going to be George Washington, then John Quincy Adams or whatever.
No,
John Adams.
Washington, John Adams,
Thomas
and then
Jefferson.
Thomas Jefferson.
Okay. Now, you're not going to have, like, you couldn't just put, Abraham Lincoln, he's going to be what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 12, 13, 14. He's going to be like the 16th president of the United States.
Correct.
And, so he doesn't fit in with, just counting from the beginning of the United States. But, maybe there's some way in which he fits in with Millerite history. John Tyler is the president in 1844. And then you're going to have James Knox, Zachary Taylor, Millard Fillmore, Frank Pierce.
Right.
So, yeah. So Abraham Lincoln would be the 6th from, if you don't count John Tyler as one, he'd be the 7th if John Tyler is the 1. I'm just saying, I'm just looking at these. Can we make Abraham Lincoln, the 7th, right? That's all I'm looking at. At the beginning of the United States.
Well, it's entirely possible, because in looking at so many of these things, James Buchanan, the president before Lincoln,
Mm-hmm.
was a Democrat. The first Democrat president of the United States was Andrew Jackson, who was the 7th president.
Okay.
The 8th president, Martin Van Buren, was also a Democrat. We have spoken quite a bit about the first Republican, but in these Lincoln, but in these lines, we've never really taken the time to observe the 1st through the 8th Democrats.
Okay.
And the Democrats were the ones that were they were the ones that were there for upholding slavery. Just like right now, most of those within that party are upholding rights of other groups, small people, as we would describe them in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
So there may be something else that we need to look at.
Yeah. And I mean, right now we're just trying to sort through these things. We're trying to find a consistency. So whether we look at, because Jeff did look at the different presidents in different contexts, but here at the end, if we're going to say, that there's going to be a 7th president, he's going to parallel Artaxerxes in a mirror fashion. That is, this is the fall of the U.S., not the building up of the U.S. Right. So, and I would say that the next president, I mean, I've tried to guess based on scripture, what's going to happen. And I don't know that I can tell what's going to happen. I mean, I don't know, is there going to be a major right-wing backlash in the United States? One thing we can say is there will be a civil war.
Brother Theodore,
Yeah.
where does the Sunday law fit in all this?
Well, that's what we're
Yeah.
trying to figure out. So
Uh,
is the next president going to bring in a Sunday law, or is it just going to be the president in which the Civil War becomes the Civil War? You know what I'm saying? Like, not just what we have now, but all out Civil War. And that could be Trump. I mean, Trump could be the president in a time of civil war. But it could also be whoever wins that's not Trump, which could be what causes the civil war. Like American politics doesn't make much sense to me. All that the media had to do was ignore Trump. All the Democrats had to do was ignore Trump, and he would have gone away, right? Or am I wrong? Has Trump become more popular with all of the opposition that he's received from the media, from the courts, from the Democrats? Has that made him more popular or less?
It's made him more popular.
Yeah. If they just would have ignored him, he would have gone away. So, and I don't know, are they just that stupid that they can't figure this out? Or is it just that they're just so caught up in Trump derangement syndrome that they just have to have this enemy of Trump?
If they didn't have the enemy of Trump, would they have a reason to exist?
Well, theoretically, their reason to exist is to have a political party to help run the country and bring about peace and prosperity in the United States and just be sensible leaders, right? But the whole system has devolved into this adversarial idea. You need this enemy to take the focus off yourself. But they could have just ignored Trump and he would have gone away. So Trump is more popular than ever. I mean, it is possible he could win the Republican nomination. It's possible he could even win the election. But whatever happens, I can't see anything other than civil war. And so if Artaxerxes represents the setting up of the civil authority in Jerusalem, because that's what Artaxerxes' decree does, right? Then whoever this president is, it would be the tearing down of the civil authority. That is, we would just have to say, whoever the president is, it's going to mark the civil war, right? So he's a civil war president. Right? That's pretty badly spelled. Okay. There we go. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense. And also, since Xerxes was killed by one of his own, I think, am I correct? You can expect whoever is going to be elected will also be assassinated.
Well, yeah, I don't know how Artaxerxes died. But yeah, it's whoever's going to be elected. I mean, I just think the United States is heading for a civil war. I mean, a more all-out civil war, a bloody civil war.
Yeah, 06.
Yeah.
I'm just warning people, get out of the US while you can.
Yeah, and the other thing that we see, I'm not a believer that what's happening in Israel is, need to look at the prophecies of the Bible to find out, where that fits in with prophecy, as the evangelicals do. But we can say that the civil unrest in Israel definitely can be a catalyst for what's happening in the United States. And the confusion that people have over, who are we supposed to cheer on, creates a real division within the left, right? Because you have some of the left, who definitely is for Hamas, but you have some of the left that is they're Jews, right? And Hollywood, in spite of all of the wokeism, is still primarily a Jewish institution, right? So there's just a lot of confusion going on right now at the present time. So who is ever the next president, we can say that if this scenario, if this line of reasoning is correct, if we're going to apply this, because remember now, we're not just applying this in the sense in our line. We're taking Revelation 17 and doing a direct application of it to the last 7 presidents of the United States. Now, sure, it's connected to our line because we have a time of the end there. But that time of the end is not just a repeat of history. It's actually a direct prophecy if we're taking those 7 kings to represent 7 presidents of this second beast of Revelation 12 or 13, pardon me, the 2-horned beast, right? So this becomes much more direct, saying that there are 7 kings, and then that the 8th is going to be the papal beast of Revelation 13. So the papacy comes in as this 8th, as a counterfeit. So this is taking these 7 kings of Judah, the 7 kings of Persia, the first 7 kings of Rome, setting them up as a parallel. And of course, the beast there is just only in relation to the 7 kings of Judah, which we could put under here as well. But so the beast now is a resurrection, because the image of the beast is being formed by the United States. So it becomes a much different idea in how we understand this 8th. It can't be an 8th president. It's the papacy. The papacy is not a president of the United States. They create even a more difficulty than we do by trying to make the 8th to be Trump, when it's clear that the 8th is the papacy. Now, of course, they could do it as a parallel in some way, but this makes much more sense to me, what we have here. We just don't know who the next president is, whether it's a Republican or a Democrat or what it is. But we have a 7th president who's a Civil War president. And that dissolution of the United States, sets up the Sunday law. So that Civil War president may bring in a Sunday law as part of the plan to get the country back in shape. I don't know. But ultimately, we're going to have the beast. And the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet then all come together at the end.
Brother Theodore,
Yeah.
can I put forth a theory? It's just a theory.
Okay.
But you do know if Biden declares war, and that he himself will stay in office until that war is over with, right?
No,
Yeah, that's what happens when you're in war.
not in the United States.
Why is it not?
Why would it?
Yeah, I think that's what they call the continuity of government. I think there is a law about that.
No,
No,
okay,
it's not.
okay, let's look at this in a different way. If the United States, let's say the United States goes to war, and war technically cannot be declared by the president. You're aware of that, right?
Right, right,
War has to be declared by Congress, the House and the Senate, right?
Yeah, because
right.
money's involved as well and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, the president just can't declare war.
Okay. We have those that would wish to believe that a president can totally suspend an election and remain in power. Did that happen with Lincoln during the Civil War?
No, it didn't.
Okay. Did that happen with Franklin Delano Roosevelt during World War II?
I don't think so, no. Mm-mm.
Okay. Now, the elections went forward. Lincoln was very, very direct. He is famously quoted with, "You don't change horses in the middle of a stream." Now, when Lincoln ran for re-election in 1864, who was his running mate?
Was it Grant?
No,
Oh, it wasn't Grant. I'm sorry.
Grant was his general.
Okay.
What he chose in 1864. Now, what many people don't observe, Lincoln did not run as a Republican in 1864. Are you aware of that?
No, I'm not.
He ran under what was called the National Union Party. His running mate in 1864 was not his running mate in 1860, which was Schuyler Colfax. His running mate in 1864 was Andrew Johnson, a Democrat. It was the only time in American history where members of two major parties were united on one ticket. Because Lincoln wanted to bring the country together. Johnson was a senator from the state of Tennessee, which had seceded from the Union. Now, in regarding continuity of government, in order for an election to be suspended, you would have to suspend the Constitution.
Okay. Well, I stand corrected. I just thought, it was the idea. I didn't.
Right. And in this case, brother, the point that I'm trying to make, we are looking so much for this the coming Sunday law. We know it's going to be there, right?
Right.
But don't we also recognize that the Constitution will be abrogated, the Constitution will be set aside?
Right.
So in these situations, when we're looking at what's going to happen, we need to be looking at the steps that are leading us to this point.
Mhm.
So here we have Biden. We've had as a situation for many to be aware of. Since the 25th Amendment went into the Constitution regarding the secession of power, we have now had 3 times where a party became the acting president because the president of the United States had become disabled. The first time this happened, George Bush the first had to become acting president because Ronald Reagan had colon cancer surgery. And that occurred on the 13th of July of 1985. Dick Cheney became acting president twice. The first time on June 29th of 2002, and the second time on the 21st of July of 2007, when George Bush II had a colonoscopy. The most recent was on November 19th of 2021, when Kamala Harris became acting president when Biden had a colonoscopy. Now, had something happened to any of these men while they were under anesthesia, these others would have become president. But it didn't happen that way. So the situation we have right now, what if something further happens to Biden? We then have Harris as the president of the United States. For me, that's a very scary thought.
You the only one.
So historically, yes, I can agree with this list where Trump is lined with Xerxes, because we can see that we have 3 kings coming since Cyrus, and then the 4th, Xerxes, being richer than they all, matches well with Trump. Having Artabanus as Biden works under the current constitutional form. Going to a Civil War president as the 7th makes logical sense. And then seeing that segue into the beast as the 8th, I think is the best explanation that we're going to be able to have at this time.
Mhm. Yeah. Now, so with Collins' line, I have trouble starting with Reagan as one, just because of how we've paralleled these.
Right.
So that's not really taking the model that we have with the kings of Persia or the kings of Judah. Now, I mean, obviously there's lots of speculation about what's going to happen, and people keep looking for the Sunday law. But the Sunday law is not really the next step. Right? You're just not going to have a president come in and just declare a Sunday law.
No, you're not.
Right? So, the question is what precipitates that? We see that there's going to be a civil war. Ellen White says that there's going to be. We see that working in what's happening in the United States. That people are just getting crazy in how they're looking at things. Nobody cares about what the truth is anymore. And we have no trust in the media. The country is really preparing for civil war. So, however we're going to look at this, all we can see is that whatever is happening next, no matter which way it goes, whether it ends up being Trump or not, that the United States is heading to a civil war, and that would make the most sense. But we don't know. We don't know if this model is correct. This is just a suggestion.
I think this model has more validity than many of the others.
Yeah, I would say so. And definitely we can see now the explanation of Revelation 17. But the beast that was and is not, even he is the eighth, means that it can't be a president.
Right.
And he's not one of the seven. He comes from the seven. That is, the seven presidents of the United States who are involved in the dissolution of republicanism and Protestantism in our line. They're going to cause the image to the beast. And as many as, to worship the image and the beast and his image, right? And that would mark the eighth. So it doesn't really say that, the eighth is necessarily a king as such, even in that context, but just that the eight is a symbol of a counterfeit of Christ. It's the symbol of the resurrection. So all this fits together much more completely than any other interpretation that I've seen of Revelation 12, 13, and 17.
But where this also fits, just as we had been addressing before about the horns, when we're dealing with the little horn, does the little horn come up out of Greece?
Well, it comes out of one of the winds.
It comes out of one of the winds, but does it come up out of Greece?
Well, no.
Right.
No.
So this is why this parallel is helped to be supported by looking at how the little horn comes up as well.
Yes. Yeah. No, it's just very consistent with everything that we've looked at. The only question is whether it's actually going to happen this way. But to me, it seems the most reasonable. Now, we know that Jeff is writing to some degree about what's happening with American politics.
Right.
And I haven't read enough to see how he's looking at Trump completely. I just, skimmed through some of the articles when they come up.
I think.
What? Okay, go on.
I think the best recommendation that we could have at the moment is, if we've been following those articles, go over articles number 9, 10, and 11 of what he's presented on Elijah.
Okay.
It's not hard.
I haven't looked at number 11 yet.
Okay.
But generally, what is he saying about Trump? That's what I'm not certain.
If I went through number 10 correctly, if I understood it correctly, then he would be looking at Trump succeeding Biden.
Okay. So, and that's kind of what I gathered from what I looked at. Now, so for people like Colin, he's saying, well, Jeff is agreeing with me, right?
Right.
So the American group and Canadian groups are supporting Jeff coming back and writing these articles that we need to listen to what he's saying. The only problem is Jeff has rejected July 18 and would reject all of Colin's arguments for what Colin is doing in placing Trump in the way that he has, because Jeff is using a different method to get Trump back, right?
Right.
Okay. So Jeff has rejected all of the different arguments that we've used before, and he's just starting from, going back to the drawing board and then just saying, looking at present events and then just making predictions with taking different stories and applying them however he wants to apply them, which is very unlike Jeff. Right?
Agreed.
Brother, and Dwight, did you see that diagram that Collins put out? On the July 18th,
I did not.
we had July 18th with April 19th. And
I-
you said it was the first disappointment.
I had not seen basically anything that Collins put out for the last several weeks.
Well, July 18th supposed to go under 1844. It's supposed to be the second disappointment.
Yeah, so what Colin's doing is just he's ignoring November 9th as the first disappointment, making July 18th the first disappointment.
Right.
Right.
And he also made January the 20th second disappointment of 2021. So wouldn't that be like moving the waymarks?
Well, yeah, it's not just moving the waymarks. I mean, it's actually completely ignoring the lines and on what's happened in the past. But this is what's to be expected when we look at the repeat of Millerite history. That we just see the same thing that happened after October 22nd, 1844. People making predictions and not following through.
Well, you can expect me to get already punished over this, but I'm just saying that when he puts July 18th as the first disappointment under April 19th.
Yeah.
To me, he's already denying July 18th. Wouldn't you say that? Because he's putting it under April 19th.
Yeah. It doesn't make any sense. So here's what you're talking about.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah.
So he put it under the first disappointment and calls it the midnight cry, right? So
yeah. Now there's a reason
I just don't understand.
Yeah, so yeah, there's a reason he's doing that. So he's looking at the 186 days from July 18th to January 20th. Now, is that 186 days? I don't think so. Okay, that is. Oh, right, that is. So 186 days from July 18th to January 20th, 2021. Okay. So that's going to be like April 19th and October 22nd. So he's taking those two there. What's the problem with this, though, is putting July 18th as the first disappointment? Because November 9th, it's going to parallel April 19th, right? It's going to be the first disappointment. So it is possible on some kind of line that we could do this, right? Because you got the 1,533 days. Yes, I remember this now. Right, so you got 1,533 days from November 9th, 2016 to January 20th, 2021. Now, would Jeff do this?
I don't know what Jeff would do.
Well, he wouldn't accept this, right? Because if he accepts this, then he can't make the statement that all of the stuff that led to July 18th was nonsense, right? Because if you accept this, you have to accept all the arguments that led to July 18th in the first place. And Jeff is saying, we made a mistake in all of that. Not just about the event, but actually as to the time.
What that would be like is saying that the Millerites made a mistake with the first disappointment of April 19th of 1844.
Yeah. Now, so I think that there's a validity in this chronology, right? But what we can't do is say that this is the line, that we're now going to say that this is the first disappointment, this is the second. We need more than that. So, we should look at this at some time again, because we have other lines where we have, January 6, 2021 and 187 days. Right, that's going to be from the 100 days of prayer.
Using this.
Yeah.
How many days would we have from July 18th of 2020 to December 6th of 2020?
I can't remember what it is. It's not a significant number that I know.
Okay.
I can't remember what it was. It was like around 150 days, but more or less. I think it was less, but I don't remember the number. But anyway, the point is, there's validity in what he's showing here, but this wouldn't be accepted by Jeff. Because if Jeff accepted this, then he has to go back on everything that he said about how we have done this in the first place. But also, even if you have this as the second disappointment, if you're going to try to parallel this with Millerite history, then you do have a problem as far as, taking Jeff back. Because we can't take back William Miller after October 22, 1844 as the leader of the movement. So people can use things that are correct, but if they're not put in a proper context, they're not going to make sense. They're gonna draw wrong conclusions. Anyway, we went a little bit over, but I appreciate the discussions today, and we're going to address some of these things in future studies. But any comments before we close with prayer?
Not for me.
Dear Father in heaven, thank you for the study today, and we ask for your continued presence as we look into these things, as we try to understand them. And we know, Lord, there's much that we do not understand, and there's many places in which we are wrong in our understanding that we need to be corrected. So we just ask for your Spirit to continue to work in our lives, and we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.